Hello, I'm Robbie Sherman, and I'm personally inviting you to join me on Conversations with Robbie Sherman. We go through a new niche topic every episode with one of my very special friends who always have something cool to contribute. We go through movies, we go through video games sometimes, we go through animation very specifically. I love animation. Now, I must admit the podcast is a little bit of a vanity project, but I hope you'll understand me when I say that I'm more than excited to show you all the cool people we're working with. We have 2 subcasts coming out as well as regular episodes of Conversation with Robbie Sherman. If you're into 90s animation, there'll be one on the Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat. And to celebrate the announcement of the upcoming Community movie, I am proud to present Conversations about Community with Robbie Sherman. I am finally throwing my hat into the community podcasting ring after so long, and it will be glorious. We have so many cool people coming on. Right now, I can only announce that You Can't Disappoint a Podcast and Kevin Lanigan will be involved, but I have a few tricks up my sleeve either way. And I can't forget about the upcoming Freak Out Freakazoid podcast featuring Thomas Stoneham Judge, Ash to Ashes, and our lovely friends Mr. Ray and Trent from A Nightmare on Fear Street. You can find Conversations with Robbie Sherman on Anchor. Please look us up. We have such an incredible year coming up. I can't wait to make you a part of it.
Well, Steven, we're here. We're almost done with Community. I didn't think we'd ever make it, but we made it. And I think, how about, just for old time's sake, we record an intro to the podcast just one more time.
Let's do it, Zach. I think we can handle it. If you like what we do here, make sure you mosey on over to patreon.com/can'tdisappointpodcast. For as little as $5 a month, you too can feed a Zach and Steven in need, and you'll get access to all sorts of awesome content. Our weekly live pre-show that we do, You Can't Dis a Pre-Show. We've got some bonus podcasts on there. Days and days, just scads of content over there for you. Plus maybe some new stuff coming soon, so make sure you put your ear to the ground, send us your bones, throw us at least a $5 and see what it'll get you.
Follow us on Twitter over at You Can't Dis a Pod and tell us what show we should talk about next.
If you just can't get enough, watch those patties and come over and double tap us on Instagram over at Can't Disappoint Podcast. We're also on Facebook and YouTube under the whole name of the show, You Can't Disappoint a Podcast. All sorts of vids, things to like, subscribe, and slap the bell to get notified.
After we finish the series finale of Community, we'll still be a weekly community podcast for the rest of 2022 as we conduct a series of community superlative podcasts where we'll be creating top 5 lists on several different community-related topics. Follow us on all our social medias to see how you can be a part of those final podcast episodes.
Speaking of 5, if you think that we're both 5-star men and this is a 5-star show, make sure you leave a review wherever you review your podcasts, on Apple Music, on Yelp, on Spotify, on TripAdvisor. We're there. Just check us out.
Everyone, it has been an honor to do this Community Rewatch podcast for the past few years, and I hope you'll stick around with us as we wrap it up and move on to the next thing. Steven, what do you have to say as we move onward and upward?
Thanks for sticking with us as long as you have. We hope that you hitch your get-alongs to our pick-em-up and ride along with us into whatever the future holds.
All right, and for one of the last times, let's do it. Let's start the episode of You Can't Disappoint a Podcast. Okay. Do you guys that have podcasted for a long time, do you actually do any type of anything to warm your... I sure don't.
No way.
In fact, I'm more on Zoey's side. We're ripping bongs moments before we're pressing record.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that's awful for my voice. So if the first 30 seconds of our episode anytime just sounds scratchy and gravelly throated,
you can't
know why.
disappoint a podcast.
If there's one thing I can do stoned, it's talk about Community. So.
Hi, everybody out there, and welcome to our prolonged pat on the back victory lap era here on You Can't Disappoint a Podcast. That's right. For the next 2 months, it's nothing but self-congratulations, right?
You know that meme of the guy that like you see him like biting the metal and like popping the champagne and grabbing like the girls behind, but then he's like on like in third place? That's us right now. We are the second community podcast to do every single episode one by one, and we are running around like we're the first.
We sure are, aren't we? Hi, everybody. Welcome to You Can't Disappoint a Podcast. I'm glad you're back. We may be done with community as far as episode by episode recaps go, but we've still got a lot to do, starting today with our season 6 roundtable. You know them, you love them. There are tradition around these parts to get a few of our favorite community friends together at the end of the season to talk about it as a whole in a more panel show kind of format. And I'm really excited. We're going to get into that in a second.
It's like the $100,000 pyramid, but no prizes, no pyramid,
no production value.
Yeah.
Didn't Dick Clark host that for a while?
Maybe Michael Strahan hosts now. It's a callback.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zach, and in this self-congratulation era, I'm as proud of a proud boy as I can be.
Oh my God. I don't have a quip. I will say when Zach said prolonged earlier, I thought he said prophylactic, and I kind of jumped the gun. So dealing with that.
And your name is?
And I'm Steven. Sorry.
We're here again for this roundtable. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do, we've got to sell some wares. Of course, this show is brought to you this week by Conversations with Robbie Sherman. And we've got to start off this podcast like we do every time by shouting out our $10 and up patrons over at patreon.com/Can't Disappoint Podcast. Those people are Danny M. Lugo, Mary Baker Budisa, Brian Thurman, Planeswalker Prez, Emmy Azrael, and Brandon Folkemer, and of course, Conversations with Robbie Sherman. We like those people, don't we?
Interview with a Shermpire.
And of course, we wouldn't be here and quite literally wouldn't know any of the people who were on our roundtable today if it wasn't for that broad-chested specimen of
that just
manhood.
For men's touch of gray, scented fox him.
That is, of course, our beloved father at Communities on Twitter. We couldn't do it without you, Pops. And I'm sure you're just counting down the days until this podcast becomes dormant and you never have to hear our voices talking about you in such ways.
Did you see
ever again?
The tweet after last episode where he was like, if ever I was your father, I'm not anymore.
Like, just listen to the most recent shout out. Jesus Christ was what the tweet said. That was truly a masterclass in going from talking about coming out of his hoo-ha to I don't know, getting misty-eyed over how great friends we are with the dude. Anyway, that isn't important. Thanks, Communities, for all you do at Communities on Twitter. If you don't follow them already, also, if you like what we do here, Can't Disappoint, patreon.com/Can't Disappoint Podcast. Go check that thing out. You've got You Can't Disappoint Show, Brokeback Bebop chugging along weekly over there, and early access to this podcast and everything we do over there. Please consider supporting us as we bridge this gap from community to the good place. We haven't been able to discuss it yet on pod. It's official. The poll for our next podcast has concluded, and beginning January of next year, we're doing it, buddy.
We're doing
episode by episode, full main feed podcast on the Good Place. There's going to be a lot of information about that over the next couple months. So stay tuned. That's really exciting. In the meantime, let's get into our season 6 roundtable. What do you say? Did you have a good time today?
I did. I had a blast.
Okay, great. Glad to hear it. Well, now let's all blast together right on into our season 6 roundtable.
Rev up those leaf blowers and let's get down to business.
Let's go.
Bubble, 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 bubble. That's the sound mine makes.
All right, I am really excited to be joined by some of our favorite community podcaster friends one more time. I think one of our favorite parts of doing this podcast has been at the end of every season, gathering some of the cool people we've met and talking about it as a whole, because it always feels like an accomplishment when you finish podcasting about a complete season of television. And Steven, we just finished the sixth one. We're done. We finished it. So we get to do this for the last time.
I know, this is exciting. It's a monumentous occasion.
Well, let's invite our friends. We've got three lovely podcasters here with us. I'm going to start off with TV's Kevin Lanigan, our good friend. You know him. Maybe, I don't know this for sure, but maybe you're the person that's been on our show the most times.
I think that's a fair...
That's some pillars of garbage.
This is my entrance music. I need you to put this in there, but good.
I can do that. I can do that. Yeah,
Not
true
blasphemous.
season 6 patron saint TV's Kevin Lanigan.
Absolutely. For, back when a year ago when I was doing a podcast about Community, it was, I suppose, one of the things on Community Twitter I was known for was stumping up season 6.
Yeah.
And Frankie Dart, Elroy Patashnik, the whole gang.
I've been looking forward to having you for this conversation because I don't know, it's almost as touchy of a subject as season 4 is sometimes. Season 6 is.
Absolutely.
It's a different beast, and I can see why you love it, why you hate it. I'm excited to see what everybody thinks. Kevin, you mentioned that you a year ago were a Community podcast because you guys were the first to podcast about every episode of Community, which is a really neat accomplishment when there's been, I don't know, several baker's dozens of Community podcasts.
Absolutely. At its height of that group chat of all the Community podcasts on Twitter, I mean, we were looking at like 15, 16, 17. Like it was a wild number. And like so many of those have just completely fallen off at a certain point or another. So congratulations to Zach and Steven. Like you
Yeah, that's what I was hoping to get out of asking you that question. Like, can we turn this around to us?
Go away. You did it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, we were the first. We also did it like 2 episodes at a time for the first 4 seasons. I wasn't
going to bring it up, but
we were clipping. I was speed running Community. We were fucking going.
So before I introduce everyone else, what are you doing now that you're not doing Community? What can people see you doing on your podcast now?
That's right. The same feed. You can hear us book club our way through the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books.
Nice.
If you miss me talking about TV shows, I do have a podcast currently about Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Oh, heck yeah. Great show.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great show. That one's monthly.
Song.
Oh, yeah.
my jam.
A classic. Talking about things I love, musicals, TV comedies. It's everything. Absolutely. So that's Crazy Ex Pod Friends. The other show is Advanced Media Studies. But, both of those are kind of the second project because we're also trying to write a romantic comedy film that I'm going to direct. And that is most of my brain for the foreseeable future.
Nice.
That's awesome. That's exciting. Can't wait to hear more about that. Good for you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. I want to bring Zoey Wilshire in, another person you'll be familiar with if you're a long-time listener of the program, but it's been a little while, so I'm glad to have you back. It's been too long.
Yeah, it's been fucking forever. I've definitely been on your show more recently than my own show, if that
Is that true? Wow.
So even though it's already been mentioned at this point, yes, I'm one of the many Community podcasts that fell off. So I'm honestly very grateful that you still referred to me as a Community podcaster. But that is, of course, how we all know each other. But yeah, I've been good. I was mostly podcasting when I didn't have a full-time job, and now I have a full-time job and I get home and I'm tired. So I don't really do this anymore. Yeah. Also, I podcast for work, so it's kind of like,
whoa, that's cool. I didn't know that.
It's not like my own thing. I just edit it, so it's just like, editing on my off time doesn't sound fun to me anymore. So I've been trying to get back into it though. So I don't know. I mean, stay tuned, Feel free to, follow my Twitter feed or whatever, and maybe something will come back soon. I don't know if I see myself going back to 1 episode at a time. I applaud you guys for getting through all of it like that. I mean, like that's, I think I didn't even finish season 2, so well done. Yeah, I was right at the end there. In fact, I think I have like 2 unreleased episodes with Zach, actually. So thank you in retrospect for
you're
doing
saying
that.
I
never aired.
We try not to release episodes with Zach either, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, Zach, all those things
Zach.
you said, I couldn't release the episode. And I couldn't have a missing episode, so I just had to quit,
Well, I definitely still consider you a Community podcaster because when Steven and I started, getting close to 3-ish years ago now, you and Kevin specifically were like the cool kids, and we felt like at some of those early group events, we were like the new freshmen who didn't know anybody, and the two of you knew what you were doing and were very outgoing and friendly and helped everyone out. And I've always, I don't know, I still look up to you guys for it. So I'm very glad to have you back one more time.
Yeah, I think the first time we met was during that live stream.
Yeah,
right?
the Black Lives Matter live stream that we did. That was terrific.
Yeah,
that was great.
Well, I also want to bring in our third guest, who is new to this show, but we have had a crossover events of sorts in the past. We've got Colin Cox from the Hop-Ons Podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm wonderful. It's nice meeting all of you. Zach, I know you, but I'm meeting everyone else for the first time. So thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Is that intimidating for you?
Colin.
Do you feel like it's, I don't know, do you feel the pressure with all these new faces, or are you ready? Are you good?
Well, it's interesting because I don't know if I've ever done something like this before. Like I've at least on the Hop-Ons feed, right? So we've been podcasting since maybe 2016, right? So we finished Arrested Development and then Twin Peaks and now Community. So I've done this a fair amount, but I don't think I've ever podcasted with maybe more than 3 people. So this format is new for me. Also, it's like, is someone watching this somewhere? Like on the internet?
We've got like one person watching.
Everyone's watching.
Patreon.com/can't-disappoint podcast. Free, not free, but live stream stuff like this.
Not free.
Okay.
No, definitely not free. There is a
That's not how Patreon works, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, one of my favorite things, because almost every episode Steven and I did of Community, we just did the two of us, and I kind of like recapping the episodes, just the two of us, and having kind of a consistency there. It's fun to bring other people in, but I feel like when we've added a third, you know how it is when you try to add a third into your thing, sometimes it clicks, sometimes it doesn't, but it's fun at the end of the season to turn it into like a panel show for a second. I love discussing it as a group. So I'm glad you joined us.
No,
I love
you.
just culminating all the times where Zach was wrong throughout the season, and then everyone agrees that he's wrong, and that's really great time for me.
Yeah, I figured that's why we were invited.
I guess we can lightly get into the community talk then. We season 6 is a little bit, I guess, a controversial topic in the community fandom. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think it's kind of a hot topic?
It's definitely up there. Back when I was in the posting mines, there's a lot of conversation and a lot of comments you see of people who are like, ugh, season 6. It does like have this stink for a lot of people, which I've obviously never fully understood. I mean, I know it is different. Like the pace is different. They moved to a streaming platform. So the episodes are longer. They're a little shaggier. Definitely. Like there's sometimes you're watching an episode of season 6 and you're like, that would have been the first thing to hit the cutting room floor. To hit 21 and a half minutes. Like this gag is going on for a long time.
Which sometimes makes for the funniest jokes of the season. Those 100%. Just non sequitur bits that never would have made it on NBC. But on the other hand, you introduced yourself with Natalie's Freezing. I fucking hate that little music video moment. I think it's so dumb. It's just really, season 6 is really hit and miss like that. That can... What, did I hate
with you, Zach.
You like that?
Oh, I'm just confused. I thought it was really quite lovely. Yeah.
See, that's what I'm saying. I think season 6 has these kind of non sequitur moments that if you think they're funny, they're very funny. But if they're not your cup of tea, they last like a minute and a half, and it takes forever until they're finished.
Sure.
Fair.
Yeah. I agree with that. I was watching that episode today, and I was like, as it was happening, I was like, I never understood this like 3-second bit. Like it's like doesn't go on long enough for me to justify it for me, and it like wasn't that funny. But that's the thing, is I feel like season 6 more than any other season is driven more by the jokes than the characters. And that's not to say there isn't great character episodes, but like it feels much more like they would cut, in favor of the comedy rather than in favor of the story and the characters. And I think when you had so much less time when they were on the network and had to do 21 minutes, like they had to be a lot more strict with what got to air. And sometimes that can be a benefit. And I think season 6 is an example of how sometimes those restrictions are good. I agree. I think calling it shaggier is definitely like the best way to put it, because like, there's definitely times where I wish some older community episodes had a little more room to breathe like that too. So, I think, it's not that they're bad because they're long or they're over long. It's just that there was something really concise about, the first couple seasons of Community, especially like season 1 and 2 and 3. Like they're just really like, every episode was like a little mini movie, and none of season 6 feels like a TV show, like a streaming era TV show, like,
Sometimes how long they are, it feels like you're watching a movie. It just keeps going on.
Right. Yeah. Ironically. Yeah.
Yeah. It does. I mean, I will say, because when we were charting this, I was like, okay, so like the highest they hit is like 25 minutes, I think, which is like 4 minutes longer than the network.
That is not
Community.
true.
Oh, there's like a 31-minute episode.
Yeah,
there's
Yeah.
If you're
The
cutting
longest
out
one's over 30.
the in-credit music sequence, maybe, but there are definitely episodes there's at least one episode that's 30 minutes, and a lot of them are like 27, 28.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where
Yeah.
you're getting your facts from. TV again.
My brain is hazily remembering.
He just started counting at the beginning and stuff.
Some bad things. Yeah.
How dare
but
you
it was,
misremember episode runtimes? Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. What am I good for?
Yeah.
But at least it doesn't get to, and I don't mean to disparage another sitcom, but like there are episodes of the streaming Arrested Development that are like 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
was about to say,
are-
like, if you want a shaggy episode of a streaming television show, I'll give you episode 2 of season 4 of Arrested Development, which is like 40 minutes of George Senior in the desert.
The episodes are 40 minutes long, and it's not the Job one; it's the George Senior ones.
Yeah.
God.
Here's something interesting. You were talking about links of episodes on Google, just because I wanted to make sure I had all my narrative straight for all of these episodes. Google says that every episode of season 6 is 22 minutes long.
No,
that's incorrect.
False.
I mean, I know
news.
it's incorrect,
Fallacies.
but it's just interesting. So yeah.
Colin, what's it like to think about season 6? Because I know on your show you're in season 3, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Does it feel weird to look at this era of the show? Does it feel very different from what you're watching right now, or does it feel pretty similar?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would challenge the premise a little bit, because I think all episodic serialized TV shows are like this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how similar is season 3 of Community from the pilot episode of Community, right?
Absolutely.
So when I hear anyone say things like, because Kevin, I think you said this before, a common criticism is, well, season 6 is just not the show. It's, well, locate the show for me, right? Because I'm not, I like all, especially television during this era that was on a network that wasn't like a streaming platform today, maybe, where they produced all of these episodes before, and so now they just decided to release them at a particular time. It's just the show is changing and evolving as the people who made it, and so I guess I don't know how to answer that question in a lot of ways, because I never really know what a show is. A show just becomes whatever it becomes, which is probably not very satisfying. But I think the thing that I like so much about season 6 that actually reminds me of early seasons of the show is that it does such a wonderful job of finding time for both new characters and old characters, which I don't know. I'm not sure. I would need to revisit season 5. It's been a minute. But I thought it was really interesting what this season does with Britta. Like, I would almost want to maybe offer a defense of that fantasy sequence, because that was the same episode where Britta confessed to Elroy, they see me as a joke, but then we actually have an opportunity to see how Britta wants to see herself, and she sees herself as a kind of goddess, right?
Okay,
and
you got me there.
how often how often does the show allow Britta to be anything other than a butt to a joke? And so it's small moments like that, and I think a couple of you mentioned this before, like the Frankie Elroy of it all, like, they're just so spectacular in such a limited amount of time. So I agree. The jokes really drive this season. It's an incredibly funny season of television. So if you're someone who likes Community because you think it's funny, I don't know how you watch this season and not think it's just really funny, like the whole Elroy complimenting white people joke. Like, that's some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen in a television show.
100%.
It's so funny. So I think that's maybe how I would answer that.
I'm excited to when we get to the lists of things, because I feel like you're the type of person who thinks, well, what is a list and why am I making this list? I'm excited to see what you've slated. That'll be fun.
Amazing.
Yeah, sorry.
No, don't apologize. I think it's funny.
It can be exhausting, though. I totally understand. So yeah, I get that from my students from time to time. So yeah.
Steven, I want to hear from you a little bit, because throughout recapping the show, it's been clear that it's been kind of a drag for you at moments. There have been episodes that were tough for you to get through.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that I had not seen a good chunk of season 6 before recapping it. So this was my first time watching like the last third of that season, and experiencing it for the first time. Well, really, probably the second half, wouldn't you say, Zach? Darn near it. But there was some of it that I really didn't like, and I wanted to like it. I tried to like it. I liked parts of it, but I just had so many issues with like a solid chunk of the middle of that season. But in the same breath, the last 4 episodes of that season, I think, is one of my favorite 4 episodes runs of the whole show. And this show has some pretty darn good 4 episode runs. And I think that's one of, like, you can argue it's the best one, but I think it's in the top few. So this season's tough for me, because I think that I'm happy it exists, and I like a lot of what goes on there, but there's just so many, I think that the length of the episodes helps in some cases. The finale is a little bit longer. Awesome. There's a few other episodes that are a little bit longer, and I think it works great because you could fit more story there. But there's some episodes that I'm like, wow, I really wish they would have cut like 6 minutes of this.
Yeah, there are episodes, like one that comes immediately to mind is the Karate Kid and Gay Dean episode, which are 2 great stories, but it's an episode that has basically these 2 plots. Is that also the bird episode where Abed befriends a baby bird? I feel like they've got these longer episodes, and instead of filling it with more stuff, we're getting really long dialogue scenes. And an episode like that, I think, would have been great if it was about 25 minutes long. If they just cut a couple of.
Did you guys know that Zach's never seen the Karate Kid?
That's irrelevant. What does that have to do with anything?
Wow. I had not until we covered it on the pod. I did it as like homework.
I've done that for a few movies, but what I would argue there, Steven, is before doing this show, I hadn't seen My Dinner with Andre, and I got that episode exactly how I needed to. I totally knew I totally knew what they were saying about that movie and what kind of movie it was without knowing anything about it before watching that episode. So I don't think
the moral of the story, Zach, is you need to watch the Karate Kid.
Sure, I'll watch the Karate Kid, but I don't think not having seen the Karate Kid makes the episode good or bad.
You just don't get it, man. Chang was the perfect Miyagi.
I liked it the same amount before I watched Karate Kid and after I watched Karate Kid. It did not move the needle one iota.
I expect the same.
Absolutely. But yeah. And it's circling back around, because this is, there's another controversial topic in the community fandom. There's 2 very controversial topics that I do think need to be discussed in a full discussion of season 6. One of them is TV's Britta Perry, as played by Gillian Jacobs, who, for a lot of people, they so despise in the core of their being the journey that Britta takes as a character on this show. They absolutely cannot cotton to Britta Perry after a certain point. And different people have different points, but there's sort of like a commonly agreed upon thing that like somewhere in the middle of season 3, they kind of lose the thread, and she becomes too much of a joke. And I have written and published a lot of words on the subject of Britta Perry. Obviously, people are free to disagree with me, but to me, the Britta arc is deeper than people give it credit for. And it took Jillian over at Welcome to Greendale, yet another community podcast, to really like put these words on there for me, is that it is not so much that Britta, quote unquote, becomes dumber. It is that she feels more comfortable shedding this facade around like her closest group of friends. So like the Britta we meet in the pilot is a put on. We as we all put ourselves on in social situations, right? And as she feels more open with these people, she can reveal that she's a fucking goofball, that she's a nut, that she's a fuck up, that she's all these different things. But to me, Community never loses the thread is that like she is sometimes extraordinarily competent, as laid out in this season in advanced safety features, where like
great
she
episode.
can sell the fuck out of a Honda to this day, you know, and like she can absolutely nail that. And you know, for everyone's problem with Britta, Gillian never lost a step along the way. Truly,
that's where I stand with it now. I do kind of agree with some of the criticisms of. I feel like what were they doing with that character in the writers' room sometimes, especially as the show hemorrhages characters. Then all of a sudden in season 6, we're giving Britta some, but I feel like we're not giving Britta or Annie near enough in the final season. However,
Annie and Abed get lost this season.
Abed as well. However, Gillian is so fucking funny. And when she gets to do something weird, it makes me laugh harder than just her absurd reaction in the series finale makes me laugh every single time. So it's kind of hard. It's like maybe Britta isn't as complex of a character in the later seasons, but she's a whole lot funnier though.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
We get her parents in this season. We get her big speech about America in the email episode. Like there's a lot of good Britta if you in here. It's just, she doesn't have as much spotlight time.
I'm not that big of. I've gone back and forth on this. I'm not that big a fan of the Britta's parents stuff. And I like Britta in this season a lot. And to everything you guys were saying, I think like if you go back to season 1, like whether it's the episode where she becomes, you know, the butt of every joke and all that, or the you know, turn it into a snake. Like she's always kind of had that goofier side. It's just by this point in season 6 she has no filter through it. But the parent stuff to me felt like this is where I think the season's just serving the comedy, because the actors are funny, absolutely, the scenarios are funny, but I don't feel we're true to the character. Like I think they write it well in the sense that like I think it works for her to have that kind of relationship with her parents, but I don't think it necessarily made her character more interesting or, you know, any of that introduced her parents. Like I thought that was unnecessary backstory, or just unnecessary, you know, like I don't think it really added anything other. Like they could have made me laugh just as much with something that to me would have felt more consistent with the character.
I remember what bothered me most about that wasn't even Britta or her parents, but the relationship that everybody else had with Britta's parents, and how shitty of a friend group they are just to serve this whole, we'll ask Britta's parents for money and haha, poor stupid Britta. Everybody else really pisses me off in that storyline, not Britta or her parents.
Also, like I don't want to be the asshole like nerd who's trying to keep canon consistent in a sitcom, but it does, like, to me that's like stepping over. Like there's nothing that indicates they have any kind of like knowledge, or like it's just such a like flip on like what we're supposed to know about the characters. Like there's other things where they'll like reveal, you know, so and so, like Jeff and Britta were sleeping together that whole season, and like you can go through it, you can see like even if it's not explicit, like there's at least it's believable. But like I don't believe for a second that like at one point Jeff mentions the New Year's glasses being zeros, which means it was 2009, which means it was season 1. And I'm like, no, like that wasn't, he didn't meet Britta's parents in the first half of the first season. Like I just don't like buy that for a second. And at that point, it's not even a canon thing. It's just like a like consistency thing, you know, like it doesn't fit the like dynamics of the characters that have been established. So like I wish they had maybe said like they all met 6 months before or something, but like saying it's been going on for years felt like such a like weird thing to reveal in the 6th season of your show. Like I don't like any of that.
Could I respond maybe to some of that?
Absolutely.
Well,
no.
I don't want to,
Shut it down.
What do you think you're here for? Come on.
I know. Sorry. I mean, I guess I would say a couple of things. First, you know, the 6th season, I think Abed speaks to this. It's preoccupied with thinking of itself not just as a show, but thinking of what it means for Community to be a show, which is another way of saying it's and again, I think Abed speaks to this, right? It's trying to answer those larger questions like, how do people like us pay for things? So I think maybe one way of possibly trying to understand, well, why would they do that? Zoey, why would it not be 6 months, but a couple of years? It's the show trying to answer that question. Like, how the hell has Britta survived just from a socioeconomic perspective? Well, it's because her friends have taken like copious amounts of money from her parents without anyone necessarily knowing. But what I think this is maybe more to this idea of like what the show has done with Britta. You almost see a microcosm of what Kevin spoke about in the pilot when she first interacts with Jeff and she talks to him without looking at him. And then Jeff says utter nonsense in Spanish, and she has this moment when she looks so desperate, and she says, "I really need help." And I get the impression that moment is such a beautiful, beautiful encapsulation of who this character is. Someone who is affecting a particular ethos, but she's not very good at it. And all it takes is someone seeming like they know what they want to do, or someone who seems like they know what they know, and then that affect just completely evaporates. And I really actually like a lot of what this season does with Britta, because, you know, again, maybe I'm just disagreeing, but I thought the explanation that Britta as a character who was so belligerent and rebellious from such a young age, that put her in a kind of arrested development for all of her adult life, that really worked for me. Maybe it's because of my time with Arrested Development, where that's a show that wants to explore the effect that parents have on their children and how it really prevents their children from growing and maturating in a meaningful way. And I look at a character like Britta and I think, shit, you could be a Bluth, you know, like you just fit perfectly into that kind of paradigm. And then, but like what almost seems a bit insidious about it is how, and we have no point of reference here, right? But her, like, there's almost this sense that her parents are gaslighting her a little bit about this, which, I mean, there's something almost nefarious about that. And so then, like, Britta doesn't become the butt of a joke. Britta becomes like a deeply, deeply tragic figure who's been abused by these narratives that people tell about her. And so then I look at Britta and I think, well, you're just like almost the product of like systemic abuse or something, because people have been telling you this story about your life that you don't think is true, but everyone believes them. So I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone, but it was that moment when her parents,
There's that line in their intro episode where George says, like, you say we did a lot of terrible stuff to you. We don't remember that stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
what the hell?
I feel like we can all relate to that a little bit, right?
100%. You talk to your parents about something horrible they did to you, and they're like, I don't remember that. That wasn't very important for me when I did that. Seems important to you.
And then your friends say, what were you rebelling against? Love?
Yeah.
So
they
like
seem great.
Even they, So like I don't know. I think I'm persuaded by the idea that at the very least Britta felt aggrieved and there's no one there to validate that for her. And what does that do to a person, and how does that affect a person? And yeah, I thought the show was at least by my estimation effective at grappling with those kinds of dynamics.
Absolutely. Well said.
And any other topics we want to get on before we start listing it up, Kevin? You look like
I have this tendency to make things like super sad. So like I'll talk about like Britta as like
I feel sad.
No, I'm right there with you. 100%. 100%.
It's like she's been gaslit her whole life. Let's talk about that, you know.
And that's why she poops her pants and sings a funny song, is because she's been gaslit her entire life. We can obviously list it up whenever. You know, I think another thing people have against this season that is not really the season's fault is that Troy is not in it. And for so many people, he's
that
like
was one of my big questions. You talk about, well, what are people's actual problems with this season? Is it because Donald's not there along with a few other characters?
That is the most common thing that I
people's
see.
Thought of the season so much that it wouldn't matter what they put out, they would feel disappointed by Donald Glover not being there.
That's 100% part of it. Sorry.
No, I just think like what I've noticed from people who have seen all of Community is that if you watched when it was airing and you were familiar, which I think most people who watched it consistently when they were airing at least knew that season 4 was different, even if they didn't know all the details. But like people who watched it back then, it was like season 4 was the weird one, and then the gas leak year, and then the rest of the show. Then it came back with 5 and 6. But I think when
Mhm.
people watch it now, especially people are coming to it for Donald Glover and a lot and the season 1 cast are way more put off by when he leaves in season 5, and therefore don't like season 6 and to some degree season 5, because of like the most common thing I hear from new Community fans is that when Donald Glover leaves, the show falls off. Like in the same way you would talk about like any other sitcom where a main character leaves and there's like a huge downhill turn from there. Whereas I think most of us who watched it when it was airing kind of view it more as like a, it's not so much it's great and then it stops. It's like more of just it's all over the place at various points of the show, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's not like, I guess generally we agree the first probably half, but still like, I mean, there's plenty of people who love season 5 and season 6 and even season 4. So I think the under discussed absence is also Yvette Nicole Brown. I think she's a huge dynamic to the show that they don't get. Like, I think it's weird when Jeff becomes the only like I don't know. I feel like of the original of the group, there was that kind of like you had like the kids pretty much, and then you had like the adults and like Jeff and Shirley kind of like, they always tried to make Shirley seem like she was older and whatnot, but like I don't know, you get these weird dynamics where I think like they comment on it in this season, but like Frankie, Elroy, like what do like they I think they find a good rhythm, but like what like it's just a totally different show. And to Colin's point before, I agree it's hard to necessarily identify what Community is as a show, but I think if you're just looking at the cast and what each actor brings to the show, it's the most jarring shift out of any season. Like not like almost no one. What you got 4 from the main study group, the original main study group, and then like Chang and the Dean are like they're in the episode that they never would have been in 2 seasons before.
Yeah, they get promoted big time.
Like far less music, far less lighting. And because of the longer episodes, it does feel like even more so than season 4. If I didn't know anything about what was going on behind the cameras of Community, I think I would feel the same way. I think it feels a bit of a shift.
It's definitely a shift, and you miss the characters that are gone, but the new characters
are
so good. Like I can't be upset about it. Frankie
I agree.
And Troy are so good and so funny and so different from the rest of the like. Yes, Frankie and Elroy are filling in for like Troy and Shirley and Pierce et al., but they have their own unique energy that it doesn't just feel like. And it's new Shirley, like Dean introduces her in the first episode. It does have like Frankie Dart is another character that's just like extraordinarily close to my heart. I could go on for days.
I love Frankie.
And Elroy is just a fucking joke machine. Yeah. And, he's not a super funny character, but he's so goddamn funny that like, okay, fine. It doesn't matter.
I think for Community,
this is like sorry.
Just being one of those shows that they lose so many characters compared to other shows that go through the same history, I feel like it comes up on top with how strong its final season is and how they put together this newfound family that doesn't just feel like a rehash. It doesn't feel like Community, the new class at all. I think they do a really good job of making you care about this new version of this family, while also boosting up characters. Like you mentioned, Chang and the Dean wouldn't have been in this episode a couple seasons ago. I love the roles that Chang and the Dean specifically take in the group in this season. I think they're some of the highlights of the whole season for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Incredible Dean material. And I'm sorry, I know I've been talking a lot, but just like to tie season 6 back into another show that you two boys have talked about. Season 6 of Community feels like Spike from Cowboy Bebop. Someone who believes that it shouldn't still be alive. And is now just doing shit. Is now just trying, like, we should not be alive. Really we should not be on a Yahoo streaming service right now. We should not have been able to get, sci-fi legend actor Keith David on our show. I don't know. Fuck it. Let's do a Jolene parody song about like an episode where like about contemporary, queer identity culture. Let's do a fucking Sony email hacks episode. Let's do the incest wedding. Let's do it. Like it's just I love it. That is how it feels to me. Like kind of like a weird victory lap in a way of like, we should not have survived what we just did. We've been canceled more than any other show except for like maybe like Futurama or something. Like I don't know. Let's have fun. Let's have fun in literally the basement underneath where they film Parks and Rec. Like, we're the weird little show in the basement. Let's just have a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also like a victory lap that's critically looking back at itself. When I think about that Dean episode, it's really an episode that's exploring and interrogating how it's treated the Dean as a queer figure, and some of the miscalculations, some of the deeply unfair miscalculations it's made, and some of the like really just odd conflations it's made. And even when I think about a character like Elroy, I like Shirley, but part of what I find so regrettable about Shirley is how they do so little with her, right? Like she's her absence reminds us that this is a show that really allowed her to be at times nothing more than a maternal figure or a bigoted religious figure. And you have a character like Elroy who's Black, and he spends a fair amount of time commenting on the deeply tricky and frustrating dynamics of being a Black man in the tech industry in the 1990s, right? And what that did to him, and how and the sorts of choices he had to make and I believe he even says this, right, to survive in a world like that. So I think about a character like Elroy as, certainly functioning in a lot of ways that's similar to Shirley, but it's almost, again, like the show is critically interrogating how little it did with Shirley and trying to do more with Elroy, and trying to say, let's as because Community's not particularly good at exploring the Black experience, maybe because there weren't just a lot of Black writers in the writers' room, right? But whether it's successful or not, you can see the show trying at least to think through the mistakes it's made in the past, and maybe trying to do better in season 6, which is part of what I like about season 6 as well. This idea that it's shedding characters, but while it's shedding characters, it's at least trying to interrogate the shortcomings that it made in relation to those characters that it's shedding. Because, like, I would ask anyone who laments the loss of Troy, like, aren't you glad though that they got rid of Troy before they started to Flanderize him? Because they were getting pretty fucking close with him. Like I was like I'm always terrified of like that moment when a show Flanderizes a wonderful character, and I was terrified they were getting close with Troy. So yeah, I don't know.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Well, I think let's get into some listing stuff, and I like to start with the negative and get that out of the way so we can focus on the top 5 later on. I don't care who goes first. Does anybody feel excited to tell their list? Who wants to go first?
I'll go my bottom 3 first. I'll start.
Go ahead, Steve.
Because if you ever heard it, we were having a tough time for a while going through some of these episodes. So it was, in hindsight, I don't think they were as bad as they felt to me at the time, but it was a tough go of it. But my number 3 in descending order, so 3, 2, 1. My number 3 was Queer Studies in Advanced Waxing.
So the one who's been upping the Karate Kid episode all fucking year, and now it's number 3 on your worst.
Yeah, because I only like the Karate Kid part of it. I hate the rest of it.
You just you hate the part about gay people. Interesting, Steven.
Oh,
really
interesting.
I think
you hate Diego. Interesting.
Well, I do. I love Diego, but I think a lot of it's stupid. I think the ending is stupid.
The political thing is dumb. I think.
Yeah. My number 2, Intro to Recycled Cinema. I think that there's some funny parts in that one, but I didn't think it was very good. Chang was the best part of that episode, and it was just the same 4-second clip played over and again. And my least favorite of the entire season, this might be a shocker to Zach, because we disagreed on the quality of this episode.
Oh wow.
But due to the fact that this episode contains approximately 6 minutes of gold and 22 minutes of garbage,
I already know what you're gonna say.
Security is my least favorite of the.
I'm not mad at that at all.
Which one? I'm sorry.
Basic email security.
Yeah, the Gupta
really?
hacked emails.
Okay. I like that one.
Yeah, you're not gonna like what I have to
is just
say
too
here,
much
so,
for me.
Yeah.
He's a lot. Yeah, he's.
It's really hard to watch them bring Charlie Kuntz back in the final run of episodes to make not just to make blatant fat jokes for no good reason other than that they're fat jokes to him. That's really sad to watch. It bums me out.
Yeah. It felt a little disrespectful to not obviously to him, but even to like Jeff and everyone else. Like we saw them learn like firsthand that they shouldn't treat people like that. And then
That was the whole point of that episode.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's a season 6 complaint overall I have, is just that it is more pessimistic, I think, than any other season of Community. Like, I don't know. It feels like it's got more of a chip on its shoulder than it deserves to have. I don't know. Like, I get it because like the show was always under always a target for cancellation, and obviously this is the Yahoo season. But like, I don't know. Like, come on, guys. Like, you don't be like, I don't know. It's just mean. But
It's mean.
Okay, who's up? Who wants to go? Someone popcorn.
I'll do it.
Okay,
Bingo.
Go ahead, Kevin.
All right.
Yeah.
So my bottom 3, and this is actually easy. They come like all right in a row in the middle of in the middle of the season. It was very convenient of them to do that for me. I'll also start from third least favorite of the season. That's got to be your basic RV repair and palmistry.
No, I love
An
that.
episode. I like 2 of these episodes I'm about to list. It's a 13 episode season. I like pretty much every episode in there. There's only one where I'm like, skip. So basic RV repair. It really locked in for me on like a rewatch while we were doing the podcast. But again, like weak and just a little too unwieldy strange for my personal taste. But I love extra thick straps. There's a lot to like in this episode, in my humble opinion. My second least favorite, also recycled cinema. It's fine. There's nothing really to it, and Jeff chokes Abed at the end. That's kind of weird. I've never loved that.
A lot of that this season, and I don't like it a single time that it happens.
That one doesn't show up on either of my lists, so I want to bring up how much I love. I forget who it is that's the guest star in that episode that plays the film executive. But
Gutenberg.
Gutenberg,
Paul
yeah.
Reiser.
I was mixing up Gutenberg with Billy Zane in Advanced Safety Features. But
An incredible cameo.
I just love how enamored Gutenberg is with the movie, like how shitty it is.
It's so
and how
funny.
many movies he's had to have seen, and then he's like, "Oh my god, they killed him! Oh my god, what's going on?" I really like
amazing.
that episode.
Like
Wait,
I said,
isn't that
a lot
Paul
of funny
Reiser?
stuff in it.
That's Paul Reiser, right?
No, Reiser's not in that.
It's
Not Paul
Gutenberg, right?
Reiser?
It's Gutenberg from Three Men and a Baby. Police Academy himself.
I
Steve
recently
What?
learned that 3 Men and a
okay.
Baby
I
was
don't
the
know why I
highest
thought that was
grossing
Paul
film
Reiser.
of the year that it came out.
Nice.
The box office used to be much more interesting than it is now, where it's just
Right,
like
okay.
37 versions of the same movie in the pop box office. Whereas like you
I
go
just
back
thought that
a
was
couple
wild.
decades and it's like, yeah, 3 Men and a Baby was like played like fucking Titanic. Like it's just it's so nuts. Directed by Leonard Nimoy.
Whoa, I did not know that.
Of Star Trek.
Wow.
Oh
Yeah,
my
wow.
That's baller.
Directed by
Very
Leonard
cool.
Nimoy. Anyway, and my least favorite of the season always has been since the first viewing of this season, number 1 with a bullet. It's Grifting 101. Does not do fucking much for me. And I love Matt Berry.
Mhm.
But Matt Berry is not even like on his game in this episode. I've
Is
never
it his
gotten
fault? They don't really give him a ton to do.
No, it's not his fault. This episode is so unwieldy. It's about The Sting, like the best picture winner of 1973. Like it's such a weird axe to grind. This was that period of time where you could listen to Harmontown like as it was coming out weekly, and you would hear Dan Harmon like go off about the Sting, and then like, oh, lo and behold, 6 months later, there's a community episode about the Sting. Like you could hear the idea pipeline happening before your very ears. Just does not do much for me.
Yeah, I don't care for that one either.
Conspiracy theories and interior design, it is not, and I feel like it kind of wants to be.
Oh God, it wants to be
Yeah.
so bad. But like, what is?
That's a great comparison. Yeah, they're both just like about nothing for no reason, and
Yes.
like.
But one of them
But
is
that's how I feel
way
about
funnier.
a lot of this
Yeah.
season. There's a lot of episodes this
Yeah.
season where they're literally like, "What's the lesson at the end?" and no one can come up with.
That's a
anything.
huge
And,
pet
like,
peeve of mine.
Yeah, like that's something that plagues some of my favorites and least favorites of this season. So it's like it's not like it correlates to the episodes I don't like. There's plenty of ones I like that are like that, but yeah, that's a good example.
I'll go ahead and go,
of-
but that
yeah.
made me think how I really feel the same way, and now I've already forgotten the point that I want to make. So I'll just make my list. My bottom 3 starts at number 3
back
with
to
queer studies and advanced waxing.
Twins.
It's one of those episodes that has a couple of good jokes and then tells them 20 times, and I'm like sick of them by 4 or 5. It's kind of a missed opportunity. I had more trouble than I thought I would making this bottom 3 because there are many episodes that have beats that I don't like in them, but it was hard to single out specific episodes. So that's my number 3. Number 2, I also have basic email security. I think, like Steven said, it's got like 6 incredibly killer minutes of dialogue, and then the rest is a slog to get through. And it's got a lot of mean-spirited jokes, and there's, there's not enough of the way they used to treat Pierce that made stuff like that actually funny sometimes in that episode. It's just mean-spirited, makes me feel sad. And my number 1 least favorite episode of the season is actually lawnmower maintenance and postnatal care.
I couldn't disagree more.
I've never really thought the VR stuff is all that funny, and it takes up so much of the episode. And again, I do.
Worlds.
Dean's my favorite character of the entire series, and it's never done it for me. And the same with the Britta plot line is I like Britta's placement in that plot line, but the behavior of all of her friends has always made me kind of unhappy in that one too. But as I've made this list, I realized I don't really hate any of these episodes, and I don't think any of them would show up on like a bottom 10 or 15 of the series. I don't think they would.
No way.
Really? I feel a little less. I feel a little more negative about my bottom 3. That's all. Then
go ahead. I want to hear it.
This rewatch I did for this, which I tried to fit in today, so I ended up having to like part certain episodes and stuff, but I mostly got there. It was the most I've noticed things that have bothered me, and I think the problem is it's really the length and meandering nature of a lot of these episodes that just kill them for me. And like, other than my top 5, I feel like almost all of them have things that I would just completely get rid of, and without doing that, they end up just like being episodes I'm far less likely to rewatch than any others. So if I'm doing my overall every episode ranking based on like which ones I like to rewatch, like most of the season's going to be in like the bottom quarter or third of the list. Like even like there are season 4 episodes that it might technically be worse, but like they're faster and like more reminiscent of the community that I love. So I just like I'm more likely to rewatch them. But I agree with the criticisms of Grifting 101. That's my 3rd least favorite. My 11th overall of the season or whatever. It's Matt Berry's the only thing that saves it for me. But it goes on too long and they don't give him much to do in that time, so it kind of ends up not really doing much in the end. But it's just something. It's he's the only reason it's not low. It's higher than the next one. So my 2nd worst is Intro to Recycled Cinema as well. I agree with everything that's been said about that. It feels to me like an episode that like easily could have worked in a previous season, and it would have been better for that, because there's like long stretches of just them watching the movie.
Yeah,
it's like intentionally, and I feel like if they had done it in a previous season, they would have cut a lot of that, and it would have just been like them making it, which is more fun. Like it just was like a far like less interesting version of episodes we've seen before to me.
Yeah.
Plus, it becoming about Jeff, like actually, like they're just making jokes about him being jealous of Chris Pratt, and then suddenly it's like all about him. Like that episode was an Abed episode until in the last third it's the Jeff episode.
And the scene when he like tries to strangle Abed, not fun.
It's a weird shift. It's a weird episode. I like the CG jokes about gagoos or whatever. Like that's the best thing about it.
Glip-glop. Who is
Glip-glop? Yeah.
Glip-glop?
Who's Glip-glop? Yeah.
Who's Glip-glop?
And then my bottom one, and I'll say this was the only one I completely skipped today. And it's one I've wanted to in the past when I've done like complete rewatches, and it's Laws of Robotics and Party Rights. So the fact that no one's mentioned that so far, I'm curious if y'all like it more than I do, and maybe I don't made a mistake skipping it.
It's
but
fine.
like.
Yeah,
it's
fine.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very middle.
I like don't remember any jokes I like from that episode. I have a weird. I kind of hate when shows do like characters on a stick on an iPad, and for some reason that was like a thing that's a thing that's happened in like a lot of shows.
We talked about that on the podcast. About how that's like been a thing quite a bit of places and times.
And I get when they do it out of necessity in some cases, like especially a lot of shows that like filmed during COVID would have like characters on like screens for the entire episode. That's fine. Like this whole episode is just hard for like the timing and the physical comedy to be like as good as it could be, because you've got like most of the characters are just faces on a screen, and I don't know, you spend so much screen time just watching these guys talk on the iPad. I'm just like, it just doesn't grab me. It's like the worst example of how slow the season is and how long the episodes are. Like, I'm just bored to tears watching it. Like, it might be my least favorite episode of the show just because of like, it's just such a nothing to me. It's just like, it doesn't accomplish anything, and it's like 25 minutes long. So I'd rather skip it at that point. Like, I don't know.
Fair. Colin?
Only one remains.
Yeah, okay. So I'll talk about laws of robotics and party rights and all
I saw you
it's
nodding
just occurred to me that I don't think until today I understood the difference between Paul Reiser and Steve Gutenberg. So that was extremely clarifying for me, because I thought Steve Gutenberg was in Stranger Things and I thought Paul Reiser was on Community. So okay,
nice.
that's been extremely helpful to me. My number 3. Boy, I'm afraid I might get a bit of criticism for this. It's modern espionage.
Whoa,
Well, it's just, I don't understand the fascination with the paintball episodes. I like the first one. I understand contextually why it was quite interesting. I thought the 2-part from season 2 did some interesting narrative and character work, and we've actually talked about this on the Hop-Ons podcast, how it actually created like that 2-part season finale created a perfect vehicle to maybe significantly reducing Pierce's contributions to the show, and they just didn't take it, but they probably should have. From there, I just don't care about the paintball episodes that much. I think it's an interesting episode. I know it's maybe doing a bit of an homage to something like one of those Captain America movies or something. I know there's a whole elevator sequence or whatnot, and I know the Russos were connected to that, which is perhaps why they're making that homage. It just, I don't know. I need someone to persuade me to care about the paintball episodes after season 2, because I just don't, I guess. My second least favorite is Grifting 101. I think conceptually it could be really interesting. I just don't care that much about it, I guess.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with Zoey. My least favorite episode is Laws of Robotics and Party Rights. I think it's like the fact that it's exploring the way Jeff has abused the dean throughout the entire show is interesting, but it also fails to acknowledge the fact that the dean's been unapologetically predatory toward Jeff, as if like the dean's the victim here, you know. Like come on, like he like stalked and spied on one of his students just because, you know, he's super hot. I think the show could have done a better job of maybe exploring that instead of making the dean the victim of Jeff's disinterest. But yeah, Laws of Robotics and Party Rights, I just don't care. Who cares? You know, I think I agree with Zoey. It's one of my least favorite Community episodes. So,
I mean, notice how nobody said anything about the party plot line in that episode. It's just so nothing.
Oh, it's not good.
Yeah. I don't love Annie and Britta's dynamic this season in general.
Yeah.
The whole why don't you start paying for your rent, Britta? Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like if Annie of all people would understand like a contentious family relationship where she doesn't have a lot of money because of it. Like I just also just like
Annie's a Fed at the end of this season. This is her Fed behavior.
Well, that's the thing, right? I've always, even though Community made fun of Britta for her politics, they never disagreed with her politics. And like, I think this is a season where in some ways they allow her to say things that are even more true than things she sometimes. At the same time, you got a character like Annie just being like, shut up, you're irrelevant, pay your rent. Like that seems like even harsher than just saying she's the worst, you know? Like, I mean, it's like because are you the worst, but you're devalued because you haven't paid your rent.
Like Annie's become a super conservative figure who's like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps like I did. Like, you know, like, dude, like, come on. Like Annie, I don't want to say this. I'm just concerned that like Annie was trumping in 2016.
I know Annie hit us with the "gotta get off your ass and work" speech.
I'm asking where Annie Edison was on January 6th.
That's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. You know, because I'm terrified that she was like storming the Capitol on January the 6th.
She was there with Community guest star Jay Johnston. They were both there. They were
Also
storming the
Arrested
Cappy
Development
Cow.
guest star.
Also
Yeah,
Arrested Development, Jay Johnson.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That makes it
No,
even
that's
scarier to think what Annie and Jeff would be like together in today's political climate. All the evil they could do together. Terrible.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Yeah, like Jeff is one of Trump's lawyers and
Ugh.
Annie storming the
God.
Capitol. So yeah.
A few years later, Jeff could have really easily been like in the Scaramucci role. You know what I mean?
Oh my God,
That
he was
would've
so
been
Scaramucci, isn't he?
He was
Yeah.
so Scaramucci. That could have been. That would have been easy.
Well, let's segue into the better stuff. We've all gotten
I'm
our
excited to hear
negatives
the-
out of the way. Who went first? Steven, did you go
I went
first? Do you want to
first
go
last
first
time.
again?
Okay. My number 5, basic crisis room decorum. We gave a degree to a dog. Love it. Think that was fun.
Fun episode. Y'all did that episode on my show.
Full circle
we did.
moment.
We
Mhm.
did.
Absolutely right.
Number 4, contrary to the beliefs of Kevin there, basic RV repair and palmistry. I think this
I
one's
love
really
it.
funny.
I do too. That's what
Yeah.
I like. I like this season. There's only 13 options.
Yeah, I thought this one was funny. I like the Dean. I like Abed for most of it. I don't think that the joke gets super old for me like it does for some people, I think. Number 3 for me was modern espionage. I really enjoyed
Hell
that
yeah.
one. I probably my favorite paintball since the season 2.
Oh yeah.
And I thought that the sequences were good. I think it's absolutely hilarious when Jeff shoots the guy with the walkers. I don't know why, but that like caught me so by surprise. I laughed hysterically at that
It
one.
is pretty funny.
Well, it's the wave, right? It's
Yeah.
the wave. I think it's like
It's
blown
so-
away.
so
Yeah.
My number 2 was emotional consequences of broadcast television. I had never
Amazing.
seen the finale before watching it, and
Number 2, huh?
yeah, I know.
I know where you're going with this.
But I really enjoyed it. I think that it's a perfect ending to a really good show. And it had carried such a different weight at the end, seeing the and the movie. Now that we know that the movie is actually happening, that's such a cool, like, really cool experience to experience that for the first time like that. My number 1, which was instantly catapulted to one of my favorite episodes of the entire show, I think contains 2 of the funniest jokes that Community tells in its entire series run. Wedding videography. I think it is so funny. So funny. The Elroy white people joke is flawless. The fact that Garrett's getting married, but of course it's his fucking cousin. But
And
who
then they
cares?
kind of don't mind.
You're not gonna find anyone else. And Chang in that episode's hilarious. The entire study group is at its worst, which means that it's at its best. And I think that it's a great episode, and it's my favorite of the season.
Well said.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well listed. Well, I went second last time. I'll do it again.
There you go.
Go for it.
All right. My 5th favorite of the season. Apparently, this is going to be a controversial choice.
Huh?
Queer studies and advanced waxing.
It has its moments.
I love this episode
Because he's seen Karate Kid, Zach.
You put it in the same place I did.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently the Karate Kid does not help, but you know, you got some Jason Mantzoukas in this episode, which I'll never say no to.
Exactly.
I find the Dean plot fascinating. I could talk about it for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And an actual plot for Ben Chang, which like never happens. He has the B story. When has that ever happened? Queer studies and advanced waxing. My 4th favorite, modern espionage. It is one of my favorite paintball episodes of the whole deal. The last 3 episodes of this show really act as a good farewell for like every different aspect of the show. And this is them saying goodbye to their genre homages, which were such a big part of the show. And maybe it helps that I love like every movie they're paying homage to, like Mission Impossibles and old 70s espionage movies and stuff like that. But love this episode. Love how it kind of concludes Frankie's arc for the whole show. Just a great episode, in my humble opinion. 3rd fave, wedding videography, for all the reasons that Steven has listed. I think the study game is on point. The Elroy's complimenting white people is a top 5 moment of the show for me.
It doesn't
like,
get less
easy.
funny. Every
It
time you
never
watch it's
gets
just as
less
funny.
funny.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
And that's one
funny.
of those jokes that it's all Keith David, baby. If it
Yes.
was anybody else, it could come off cringy. But
Mhm.
his earnestness and his eager, it's just
Now there's
so
a man
funny.
who knows his meatballs. You know, that's so. That you say that to anybody on the street. That's funny. My second favorite of the season hasn't really come up so far. Advanced safety features.
Mhm.
I love this episode. This is a great Brita
It was
plot.
really good. It was almost
And-
my top 5.
And has another top 5 moment for me in the whole show, which is Frankie's monologue in the middle of this about how the dean is a fucking idiot. That is a masterclass on comedy monologue delivery. You should watch that before you do any
so
comedic
good.
monologue
Yes.
the rest of your life. It's absolutely great. Love the return of Subway, aka Rick. I love a single teardrop falling on a Honda steering wheel. That's funny.
That's
Yeah,
incredible.
It is.
And I love it. And my number one of the season, probably a top 5 whole series, Emotional Consequences of Broadcast Television, the final episode of the show. A perfect way to send off Community. I cannot think. The only thing that you could maybe quibble about is that like A. Troy or A. Pierce does not appear, but the episode is so strong that when I'm watching it, I'm not thinking about
Yeah, who cares? Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
perfect without them. And I'll pick
Absolutely.
up off on that. My top 5. I'll mention that I didn't put Modern Espionage on my top 5. It's kind of a middle episode for me because it compared to the other paintball episodes, it feels so all style, and they didn't really have the substance for this one. I feel like the Silver Balls story is really lame, and there's no mystery at all to it when you hear Kumail Nanjiani's voice within the first 30 seconds of the episode.
Yeah.
Like behind the gun.
Who
It's
could
like
it
the old
be?
Law and
That's
Order
kinda
thing where like they'd be like the credits they say with special guest star Jimmy Smits, and you're like, well, obviously he's the killer.
So my top 5, number 5, I have Basic Crisis Room Decorum. I think that episode is so funny. And to counter what Colin said about the Dean and Jeff's relationship, it changes everything we know about their relationship when the Dean has thought that Jeff has been encouraging him via text for who knows
Hello,
how
the
long.
Dean.
Oh, come on.
That's why I love
Since
that
the
plot
first
line
season?
so. I like to
It's
think that it's
so
been going
funny.
on for a long time. Like when Jeff signed up for Greendale, he wrote down a bullshit fake number that ended up being this overseas number. I love that, and that's my headcanon that it's been going on the whole series.
The end tags of the
Bring
season
me
are out of
Canada.
control. Like we
Yeah.
haven't talked about it at all, but the end tags are on another fucking plane of existence.
they're incredible.
Portuguese gremlins.
I mean, Zach,
the
I
Yakuza.
have like no fewer than 7 things to say about the idea that the Dean literally thinks it's Jeff, but I'll say something. I mean, my God,
Hello,
it's like
the Dean.
there's like the red flag
The
have a
Dean.
red flag, you know? So yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's
He's
I
blinded
think
by
he's
love.
so hopeful that he is
Yes.
just saying
Love
that
is
Well,
Made
he's
him
like
blind.
what, like a level 5 susceptible or something.
Level
So
7,
maybe-
all the way
Yeah.
up.
So
maybe
stupid.
11-7. Yeah, so
It's so-
maybe that tracks.
when
Yeah.
he brings that can of those 5 cans of olives, it's with complete earnestness.
I know.
And
Even if
one
I
of my
say
favorite
I do
comedic
not
beats
want.
of the whole series is Joel there. This really confuses me. This is the first time
Yeah.
you've done this.
Yeah.
Okay, my number 4, I have Basic RV Repair and Palmistry. I think to counter what Kevin said about this season being, why are we still a show? Why are we on Yahoo Screen? This is like that episode for me where it just goes fucking nanners. And I think it's so funny. I could see why you'd get sick of the flashback to 3 weeks earlier, but for me, it's one of those things that makes me laugh harder every time. All the Space Elder stuff is very funny. The Deans, this is the least amount of gas anyone has ever had, ever. The Dean's really funny in that episode. That's my number 4. Number 3, I've got Advanced Safety Features. I think it's a really underrated episode. I think it's really funny. I think Community does product placement as a plot line better than anyone else ever has.
Yeah.
I mean, Britta fucks Subway the first time. I mean, I don't. I mean, other shows have done it great, but not like that. My number 2 is Wedding Videography. It's my favorite episode of the study group are bad people when you ask anybody else. I love seeing them being the main characters of this wedding if you ask them, but just being an absolute tornado of destruction to this lovely family event. I think it's awesome. Chang at the end being like, I did this. I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. I love it. Classic. And number 1, Emotional Consequences of Broadcast Television. Come on. It's one of the most unique series finales of all time, and it's kind of interesting that people don't put it on listicle articles talking about, can you believe this show did this for their final episode? Because it's so Community. Of course Community would do this, and of course they'd be able to do it in a way that feels like it works thematically. It's perfect, it's hilarious, and there are moments in it that make me cry every time. That's mine.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess if we're sticking with the order, I'm next then. So I think, Kevin, you and I have the same list, just slightly like one
amazing.
swap. So before I get into it, I do want to honorable mention basic crisis room decorum because of the Dean texting, which in my mind is up there with every other joke that we've talked about being like all-timers. Like I think that,
Absolutely.
and the way it ends too, and just the amount of times I've just yelled 5 cans with all my friends out of context. It's just some of the best Dean delivery ever. And then he goes for it. And I also want to honorable mention Ladders as well, because I think it's such a great Frankie introduction, and Abed and Frankie in that episode are fantastic. I think it's a fantastic, probably Abed's best episode in the season.
That's probably true.
If I'm saying that right off the top of my head without thinking too hard. But then, so into my actual list, number 5, I have queer studies and advanced waxing. I totally agree with Kevin on this. I think I was on your show to talk about this.
Yes, you were. Yes, you were.
A while ago. And yeah, I just I think Dean is my favorite character, maybe in the entire show, at least definitely of this season, in the second half of the show in general. And I really like how they handled it. Like it's obviously not perfect, and like the Dean is far from perfect queer representation, but like I think this is like the best, most lovable version of it that we've seen, and it's like it is handled with some respect, or at least like a genuine attempt at it, and also acknowledges that like for all his flaws, he is the only representation on this show of queerness other than because there's the lesbian plot line where they're not actually lesbians.
Everybody's straight in that one. Boring.
Yeah, literally nothing. Yeah. So it's like they have a whole episode about lesbians where there was no lesbians. So it's just but anyway, yeah, great episode. Number 4, advanced safety features. It's definitely the episode I've rewatched the most from this season. Number 3, modern espionage. I think what stands out to me about this one is, in spite of the previous paintball episodes being directed by like the Russo brothers and Justin Lin, I genuinely think this has the best paintball action. Like in terms of genuinely effective action. Like it's not like amazing, but it's like the fight in the kitchen's actually kind of cool.
Yeah,
I'm like the parody of the elevator scene from Winter Soldier is like done really well, and like I don't know, like it's definitely a far less focused and character-based paintball episode than the previous, but it's effective to me and it's fun. And Todd flipping around at the beginning is great every time.
Todd is so funny and so unhinged in season 6. We haven't mentioned that, but his bits in the series finale.
What if I'm God?
Yes. One of the best moments of any of the supporting characters, which leads me to my number 2, which is wedding videography.
Nice.
Funniest episode of the season.
Yeah.
But the reason it's my number 2 is because number 1 is emotional consequences of broadcast television. And yeah, the title says it all. It's number 1 because it's the most emotional episode of the season to me, and it's not even close. Like there are other episodes where I connect a little bit more to the characters, but like I said, I feel like this season hasn't been character driven, and this episode feels completely character driven. And it really does a great job to wrap up and send off, the characters that are at least still there in a meaningful way. So yeah, great finale. It brings brings the season together to me. Like if it wasn't for this episode, I probably would almost write off this season. Not that I would never watch it, but just like it'd be such an outlier to me in terms of like not feeling the same, but this really tied it together with the previous 5 seasons so well. So yeah,
I would just in particular echo a lot of what Zoe said about the queer studies episode. The Dean is far from a flawless representation, and I think what's really frustrating about Community is how like you have to do a lot of like reading between the text. Like maybe like is like Abed bisexual? Maybe like what's Annie's deal? There are some times when she seems attracted to Britta. I don't know, but like yeah, I think Zoe said a lot of really smart stuff about that, and I would just echo those sentiments. My number 5 is emotional, and I would also say I don't know if I necessarily.
Whoa!
The episode. Hold on. Sorry.
It being your number 5 caught me off guard, and then you just threw it away like it was.
No.
Yeah,
He said his number 5 is emotional. It's just it has feelings.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
I haven't
okay.
gotten there yet. Aside from Laws of Robotics, I really like a lot of this season, so I do feel like I don't know, selecting among all of my children or whatever, however that metaphor goes. But my number 5 is Emotional Consequences of Broadcast Television. I think it's a great episode. I think finales are always hard. It does have my favorite moment from Community, which is the second hug, because this is a show that ostensibly begins with Jeff Winger trying to leave Abed behind, and it's a show that ends with Jeff not wanting to let Abed leave, and that's like such a beautiful, like, thinking about these are the two characters that both in many ways started and ended this show is a really lovely sentiment to me. And there's almost this sense that Abed doesn't fully understand the ramifications either in the pilot or in the finale. So that's, yeah, I love that moment. Number 4 is lawnmower maintenance and what is it, postnatal care? Is that right?
Yeah.
Which episode is that? 2? Boy, Elroy, guys. I mean, the world's within war. It's just. I'm going in. That
Use
was
a phrase
mine
I
too,
coined
like,
in the 90s.
I mean,
I set the time zone.
yeah. And I think part of it is just Jim Rash is so incredibly funny at like simulating whatever he's doing in the simulated world. I think in particular it's when he tries to attack Jeff and he's like going, yeah. It's so funny. I don't envy someone like Joel McHale just having to sit there and watch that without breaking the whole time. How do you not break the whole time? So I really dig that episode. Number 3 is Basic Crisis Room Decorum. Frankie's line, wait, our plan is to attack the dog. I think that's verbatim, but like that's such a perfect like study group tactic is like let's defame the dog's character to get out of this. Number 2 is advanced safety features because, yeah, for reasons a lot of you have mentioned, I think it's an episode that effectively and in an interesting way grapples with British politics, and in particular the politics of consumerism, which is something that the show often, while I agree with you, it's a show that doesn't necessarily suggest that British politics are wrong. They do satire Britta as a kind of political figure, but I think this is an episode that tries to take those politics seriously. And my favorite episode, and this might be because of Arrested Development, apparently I just like intellectual property that grapples with incest, is Wedding Videography. My favorite play is Hamlet. I'm watching House of the Dragon. I just seem to like incest as a theme in my popular entertainment. But it's incredibly funny, but I think, Zach, you said this as well. I think the show is quite good at suggesting that this study group is just one friend configuration within a much larger diegetic universe, which is interesting because I think sitcoms in particular, are quite sneaky at this, where they suggest that the world of the show, it really does gravitate around whomever the main characters are. But I think Community is quite good at taking a step back often and saying, no, this is just one group among a multitude of groups. And despite what we might want to think, this is maybe the worst group of all the groups at this community college. Like maybe we would have had a better time following another group. And I think this episode grapples with that dynamic quite effectively. In addition to just being so funny, I agree. I think Kevin, you said this: the Elroy complimenting white people. It's just objectively funny all the time. There's no, like, even Elroy was trying to be polite and perhaps even critical of himself, like this will sound racist. I don't know if that sounds racist, Elroy, but yeah, it's just incredibly funny. And so those are my top 5.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Before we wrap up, I do want to talk a little bit about the series finale and kind of now the implications that it's not actually the end of the story. One of my favorite things about the series finale is just how it feels like your favorite show giving you a hug and explaining to you why it's better that things end than drag on, like Man to Man. I love that. It feels like a show's creator telling a fan, this is going to end and it's okay. And it's more beautiful because it's ending. And I love those scenes that are Abed's speech about TV and what it can mean to people, like speaks to me on a meta level and an emotional level in a way that a lot of things can't, let alone sitcom television. But what do you guys think? I was never in the camp of the Community movie actually happening, to be quite honest.
I never believed it. No, absolutely not.
Yeah. But now, having wrapped up the show shortly after that announcement and revisiting the ending, it totally adds up that you could pick up this story anywhere and not demean the great work that the series finale does as a conclusion. How are you guys feeling a couple weeks after the announcement that this isn't the end?
I'm genuinely nervous about it. And it's because of how good this finale is in large part. I agree with you. I think it totally leaves room for everyone to come back and, where are they now kind of thing. It'll be like 8 years from the finale when the movie comes out. So that's like enough time for everyone to have like moved on. But I guess my biggest fear is that they're going to do to make the movie happen. I'm worried they're going to do what they did at the beginning of season 5, which, I like season 5, or what they allude to happening at the end of this season, which is that everyone's going to kind of just fail at or decide against their dreams and then end up back at Greendale. So like I need there to be like some change, some like positive check-in. Like, I don't know. I need the 8 years to matter between the finale and this, and the movie. So I think as long as they do that, then there's no, fear that they'll ruin the finale by having the movie. But if they try to, undo anything from this finale, I'll be very disappointed. And I'm not sure it'll be really worth it at that point.
I feel confident that they're not going to just make them all miserable to go back to Greendale again, because it is just like one piece of a thing. We're not setting up a whole 13 episode run of stories where everyone needs to be in the same place for the same amount of time. I'm really interested to see what these people are like when they haven't been stuck with each other for 8 years. And I really hope that they do what you said and that they make those 8 years meaningful, because I think that'll be what makes this really interesting.
Yeah.
But who's to say they haven't been stuck together, I mean, it's entirely possible that in those intervening 8 years, people have returned to Greendale and maybe Greendale's become a college with, remote campuses, and maybe everyone's attending Greendale classes without being in Colorado. I don't know. I'm trepidatious as well. It's funny because Arrested Development returned after a long amount of time, and season 4 was a recapitulation really of season 3 in a lot of ways, and the things that happened between seasons 3 and 4. And I agree. I really like the finale so much because ending stories is hard, because our favorite part of a story is not when the conflict ends, but it's when the conflict builds, or when it's at its moment of maybe greatest dramatic tension, right? I mean, there's a reason why every romantic comedy basically ends after, and because romantic comedies are deeply heteronormative, after the boy gets the girl back, right? It's because like that's the end of tension, that's the end of the conflict. I think Community almost gives you as an audience member paths forward. Like, do you want to imagine a continuation? Is Frankie's narrative where everyone's just sitting around saying hello to one another? Is it Jeff's, which almost feels like Saved by the Bell, the new class, right? It's an ending that doesn't end, but it's an ending that projects forward almost into a kind of multiversal space. So I would prefer for things to just end, but yeah, who knows? Like, there are just so many possibilities, I guess. And I guess we'll see. Like, what a deeply unsatisfying response from me, which is...
No, I'm right there with you.
I don't know.
Steven and I were lucky enough to get to tell the guy who's co-writing the movie, hey, we feel for you, because I'm sure it's hard to have to like update everybody on what's been happening, but also make this a story that's worth there being a movie. And it just seems so hard, and I'm really nervous for it. But like you say, you like it when things end. Community has been promising us this part of its story, whether they had any intention on actually following through with it from like the very beginning. It's a little bit different than some of those other cases. There's always been the 6 seasons in a movie. But it is interesting. It is interesting. What do they do with it? I'm nervous. I'm excited. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's gonna be interesting for sure.
I'm the excited kind of like, what the fuck are they gonna do?
Yes.
You know, like, and maybe it's just because like I've been through enough like bad movies and shit in my time that like, you know, if the Community movie is not great, I always have 6 seasons of a show I really enjoy. But like, Harmon and Guest are good writers, and they're gonna have, I assume at some point, you know, basically every main cast member will return, maybe not in like the most central role, but they'll all be in there somewhere. Those are all incredibly funny people. And I hate to say, like, how bad could it possibly be? But like, it's probably going to be okay. I think there is a temptation in the fandom to build these things up in our heads that like they need to be impactful. They need to be, you know, something that is antithetical to comedy being funny. Like the setting mega high expectations for comedy is only going to lead you be disappointed. I think if we all just, you know, we sit back, we wait like till sometime next year,
maybe, hopefully,
and we'll just, I don't know, I'll just keep chilling. I'll keep doing other stuff, and then one day the Community movie will come out, and that'll be chill. That'll be great. I'm sure I'll have to. Like,
I think my concern, Kevin, is like, I don't know. Have you ever watched? And my apologies if Kevin Smith is a Patreon supporter, but Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, which kind of feels like you know, let's find it. See, that's I think my concern. You know, is like we're going to get a movie like that, where it's let's just drop in and see everyone, because at this point, like, Community's become, like, the cast has become so big, including season 6. I just I have Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back concerns about what this narrative could be. So
you know, my only saving grace against that is I simply think Dan Harmon is more talented than Kevin Smith.
I think it's fair to say.
I think his batting average is much higher.
Much higher floor.
Exactly.
And a higher ceiling as well. To be again,
Absolutely.
my apologies if Kevin Smith is a Patreon. But
we just lost us $10.
You just lost. So sorry.
You just lost the Jorts vote. Yeah.
At the very least, look, Danny Pudi's going to play Abed again, and Jim Rash is going to play the Dean again, and that's something worth celebrating. That's going to make me smile, even if the story is stupid, which it probably will be, but hopefully it's stupid in a good way.
Yeah, if you told me Jim Rash was going to play the Dean again in any film, I would watch it. I would be there, you know?
Yeah. Something this conversation's reminding me of is El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, because what you were saying, Kevin, about it, like how bad could it be? Like, I like El Camino a lot. If I never saw it, I would not feel any more or less satisfied with the ending.
I want to like it more than I like El Camino.
And like, to me, it's just like that was neat. Like that was, I got a little more time with Jesse, a little more resolution, and I didn't need to see it, but in no way did it ruin or drastically changed. It was just more of Breaking Bad, and it was pretty good, and like I was able to enjoy it. And if the Community movie can be like 3 episodes of Community tied together into a movie, like that'll be 3 more episodes of Community. So like that's fine, you know, like that. I obviously want it to be impactful and all that, but like most people who watch Community don't do what we do. Like it's not that meaningful to most people who watch it. Like we're of course expecting the world from it, but like if it's like a pretty good, funny movie with the cast of Community, like what more can you really ask? Like if we're being honest with ourselves. Like if it's a masterpiece, great, but like the only one's expecting the potential of a masterpiece. Like,
right. And even more important than
just like even
more important than anything else. I don't want this to be psych, where now we're doing a bunch of community movies. No, we are one and we
6
are done.
seasons and a
Yeah.
movie. Yeah.
I am sleeping. I'm not. You can't
6
get me.
seasons and a series of movies spinning off into a
my
Peacock
God.
original series.
I was there.
Community the
from-
after years.
I was there from Community day one. I had to sit there with this show as it was canceled and revived fucking 4 times. I am not
doing it again.
like waiting for a bunch of movies. I'm not doing it.
I had no idea this Breaking Bad movie even existed. Like you
Right?
said El Camino, Zoey, and I'm thinking, what the fuck
What
is she
the fuck?
talking about?
It's
So you're
good.
right,
I
it's
like
like
El
more
Camino.
Breaking Bad.
You didn't know what
that's
happened.
awesome.
You definitely go watch it.
Yeah,
What,
it's like
Kristen
intense,
Ritter
you know.
comes back. Oh,
Yeah,
my
it's
God.
good.
It was
He's
the
fantastic.
what's the actor who plays the guy who makes people go away that passed away? Kevin would know
Oh.
this. You know what I'm talking about? The really old guy, Robert Forrester.
Robert Forster?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's his
I'm
last
sorry. I have
on-screen
not.
performance is El Camino.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
he died like a week after it came out, I think.
Wow.
What?
I have not seen El Camino or really Better Call Saul. I've not watched any
Yeah.
Breaking Bad since it stopped being on TV. So maybe I need to go back.
We'll wrap
Yeah,
this
he
up in a
was in
second.
season
Better
3
Call
of
Saul
Twin-
is incredible.
Yeah,
I
he
saw-
was in season 3 of Twin Peaks. Robert
Forster.
He's
yeah,
on Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
Yeah. Oh, Jackie Brown.
Jackie Brown's
Stunning,
good.
stunning movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jackie Brown.
Yeah.
Well, what El
You're right,
Camino, and
very
I
good.
won't spoil it for you two that haven't seen it, but El Camino just didn't have any surprises. It literally was everything that the show had told me was going to happen with the end of its own show. It didn't tell me anything that was surprising. I have a good feeling that whether it's good or bad, the community movie is going to be filled with shit that I did not see coming.
Sure.
Whether it's
That's a good
some
point.
just overarching twist on the whole presentation of it, or if it's the adventure that I just know that it's not going to be what I'm expecting. So I'm not even trying to expect anything.
That's what I heard from Dan Harmon, but there's like this thing in the back of my head that's just like this coming out now as a Peacock original makes me a little worried. Like I just like, to me it's the Yahoo Screen thing all over again. Like I know it's not like that higher for Peacock, but like I mean I haven't checked the numbers and they're all self-reported anyway recently, but I'm assuming Peacock's not the most successful of streaming works, and I could see them like
They're
looking
trying.
at this as like we know this is a niche audience that's really dedicated, and they'll
Yeah.
show up and they will buy subscriptions and we'll get some money off of them. And if they're trying to get it done just for the sake of that, like that does make me a little worried that, you know, Dan Harmon will try his best and Andrew Guest will try his best, but like it could be out of their hands to some degree if they're just like, look, we can only get 3 of the actors back, but you know, we're gonna have long shots of pictures of Donald Glover. Like, just we're gonna make this work. Like, I hope it's not nothing like that. Like, I don't know. I really, really hope. So
Well, that was Arrested Development season 4, right? A lot
Yeah.
of
Right.
the reason why it had this particular narrative structure was because all of those actors had become incredibly popular and incredibly prolific, and getting them all together for a couple of months was just impossible. So yeah, but that was a series and not a movie.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
maybe
They
it's
could do this in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They could shoot this thing,
Yeah.
no problem.
No problem.
But
Plus it out. Easy.
That's exactly what I'm worried about, though. Is like,
Right.
I don't know.
But
like,
I think
take
that's
your time
something
with
that
it,
could be
like-
good too when it comes to getting everybody together for this thing. Is if it's not,
Sure.
I don't know. There's a lot we could talk about.
I guess I want to know the writing process. Like, I want to know, like, did Dan Harmon have like an outline of this written the whole time, and that's what they're going off of? Like, is writing it months, like, you know, now after they've announced it, and then they're going to shoot it in a month, and then, you know, like, I just like, what's the? I want to know more about why this is happening now in order to really, really get excited and or confident, I should say. I'm excited nonetheless because it will be more community,
Well,
but like confident that it'll really add to the series, you know.
It was cool getting to talk to Andrew Guest because he kind of said they've been working on this in some capacity for a long time now.
Wow.
Also,
So like
great.
he
Yeah.
said, what, 3 years?
He said 2019. Dan set him down and was like, "Sony says it's time. Do you want to help me?"
Shit.
Yeah,
That's
Damn,
wow.
okay.
and they
That
spoke
gives
a
me a
lot.
lot more confidence.
They
I
spoke
like
a lot
that.
to
I like hearing
how
that.
Peacock is like, we want you to do this the way that you want to do it, and that was why they went with them instead of like a Netflix that'll go fund anything. But Peacock seems to be like,
Yeah.
we're gonna pay money to make sure people know this is happening.
Something that gives me a lot of confidence in the streaming service Peacock, weirdly, is that like the MacGruber TV show that came out last
Mhm.
year was like excellent. was like
Really?
really good, was completely in the spirit of the whole thing, had like major stars. I think Billy Zane was in like most episodes.
They made it
also.
exactly how they wanted to make it, and nobody was saying it has to be something else.
Exactly. And whether or not you particularly liked it, Zach, I apologize.
I agree with you on that.
They made it on their own terms. And I think that, I don't know, I guess I'm a Peacock stan. Like, whatever. I'm there for the cock.
I want to be proven wrong, but
I'll take it.
Well, that's true, and that's a great show. But I don't know. NBC's never been the biggest ally to Community, so that's why I'm just like.
But it's the most Community thing
now,
ever for it to get canceled by NBC so many times, and then revived by Yahoo, and Yahoo going under, and now re-revived by NBC's version of Yahoo Screen is just perfect. It's amazing. You couldn't write it better. Let's wrap this up by
I didn't
talking
realize
about...
there was a MacGruber show. I just still like I just
you got a lot of content to get.
This is what happens when you have two small children. You know, you don't
Put
realize
on
that there's a Breaking Bad movie or a MacGruber TV show. This is fascinating to me.
They didn't advertise that in between episodes of Paw Patrol.
Okay, so let's do an MVP for the season before we wrap this thing up. Steven and I, at the end of every episode, like to award an MVP award. And at the end of the season, I like to put all of those numbers together and see how it agrees with just how I feel overall, who is the MVP. So by looking at what me and Steven did this season, for me personally, I had a two-way tie between Abed and Chang. I gave them both like 2 or 3 episodes. It surprised me. I wasn't expecting
very
that.
surprising.
And in second place was also a tie between Jeff and Britta. Meanwhile, Steven, in first place for you, and this is not a character you would usually go with, Jeff. You gave the most
I
to
was
Jeff
shocked.
this season.
Wow.
And then your second place was a 4-way tie between Abed, Dean, Chang, and Elroy. I noticed that our tallies were like all over the place this season.
Yeah.
It really didn't favor everyone or anyone. Like everyone got at least 2 and 1 or 2 people got 3. Overall, if you put our scores together, our first place was a tie between Abed, Chang, and Jeff, which is interesting.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's
Isn't
so
it?
wild.
And that's not how I feel if I'm gonna give my heart answer. So let's go. Let's all go. Who do you think is the season MVP for season 6?
So I'll start this. I want to give an honorable mention to the Dean, but I think I actually am going to give it to Jeff. Jeff is far from my favorite character, but more often than not, I found myself not disliking Jeff this season, which is not always the case for me. And I think in the last episode, that cemented it as my favorite Jeff season of the show.
Wow. The last episode does a good job of telling us, like, to an extent, this has been Jeff's story. He's been our character that we've been with from the beginning all the way to the end. And it does feel very full circle for his character, how he's grown and gone from not wanting to be a part of this group at all to being scared to be himself without it. I think that's a good choice. I'll give mine. I think season 6 is the season where it most becomes less about the characters and more about the idea of the school and the silly things that can go on within it. And I think there's no better embodiment of that than the Dean. Jim Rash is so fucking funny. He's the funniest actor on this show. And this season gives us a lot of Dean. And even when it's in an episode I don't like that much, his one-liners are what I'll always remember and go back to time and time again.
Yeah. Sorry for awkwardly interjecting before you, Steven, on that, but I agree with Zach. It is definitely the Dean. I think he's just. I totally understand the Jeff take though, and I was thinking about that while I was watching the season for this. That I think it does a good job of refocusing the show back onto Jeff right before it ends, which is important. And I think with all of these, I think previous roundtables I've been on the show, I might have talked about this, like. The season always gravitates me back towards Abed or Jeff. I think they're just the two most important characters in terms of, like their stories. And I think any season could be their season, including this one. I think even Abed has some great stuff in this season, even if he's got some underdeveloped things as well. I think again in ladders, I think it's great that he's sort of anchoring everything. And him and Jeff having their final hug together in the finale. But yeah, just because it's such a scattershot weird season, I just think the Dean's just at Jim Rash is at a 12 out of 10 on this season. He doesn't miss any lines, and he makes worse episodes funnier. Yeah.
Not to break the mold, but
I have a guess already. I think I know where you're going with this.
Pretty easy slam dunk for me. This is Frankie Dart's
Yeah.
season. She owns it. She signed for it when the package got delivered. The humble outsider who came in and nailed it.
Yeah.
Every episode she does something that fucking kills me. Like, who was this Troy person? Did he own a rainbow? Was he the group's pharmacist? Like, it's just, that's funny to me. And like her arc over the course of the season for being someone who does not fucking get it. And you can watch her over the course of the show. Like, she starts learning things so she can communicate with Abed. She finds like every person's individual method of communication.
Yes.
And meets them there. I think that's a really subtle bit of like character building that no one else is doing. Yeah, it's Frankie for me. It's 100.
That was my second choice. Very good choice. She's so good. Paget is so good, and big shoes to fill. And that character had a lot riding on it, and she finds a way to make her really, really funny. Even though when the whole point of her character is that she's not very weird or funny like all the rest of them, she's perfect. Yeah. We've got to have her in the movie.
Elroy kind of split the vote a little bit. That's the issue for me. I love them both, but it's like, I feel like if I were to say Frankie's the MVP, I would feel bad for not saying Elroy and vice versa, because they're both just as good. You know?
I do feel like
Frankie's a little more important, I think, to the plot.
That's
like
exactly,
in more episodes.
That's definitely true.
The season doesn't work without Frankie, I don't think. I think she really grounds this really scattershot season to kind of having a little bit of a goal, or at least someone who's working against all of the zaniness. It's really important.
Is it me? Is it my turn? Is that right? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I agree. I agree with Kevin. Mine's Frankie. You know, it's fascinating how she self-fashions as the kind of person who would never be in a TV show. And we learn at the end of the first episode that she sounds so pompous that she could only exist in a TV show. You know, I agree with what Kevin said. You know, there are these moments when I think this was in episode 3 when she and Annie were talking, and she just goes through this like litany of ways that she thinks the study group thinks of her. It's like, well, maybe Jeff thinks I sound like Chang. You know, he's unstable, right?
He's like, yep.
And I mean the way, just even in the finale, you know, her supreme confidence that writing a sequel is easy, and then it's just everyone sitting. Hello. Okay, well, maybe it's harder than I thought it was. I think just because I would want to know how long it could last, I really want a season of her show, because it just sounds like so incredibly brutal and unwielding. But I'm curious if it would evolve. But I agree. I mean, Paget Brewster is so incredibly funny. I remember, like, the things I remember from Friends, her 3 or 4 episode arc is incredibly wonderful. She's just really funny and really interesting. And she seems like Annie, but not. She seems like a lot of characters in this show without actually being like a lot of characters in this show. She's, even though she would never acknowledge this, she's as arrogant and pompous as Jeff is.
Oh, yeah.
She's as oblivious as Britta is. She's almost like a Rorschach test for anyone who likes Community. It's like, who do you see Frankie as? Because that might say more about you than it does about Frankie. But also, like, I say this with trepidation, because we learned that she apparently is an avid reader of Ayn Rand, which that's not good. So like, isn't that, like, I don't know, the litmus test for a great character, that I love someone who's like reading the Fountainhead? So anyway, mine's Frankie Dart. Yeah.
Good choice. I think there's a very real reason why Frankie's one of the few characters we're left with at the very, very end of the final episode at that table at the bar. She is just as much a member of the group as anyone ever has been. And I think that's really awesome. So good choices, everybody.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nice.
Do we think Frankie's coming back in the movie? Just real quick, I'm curious.
I hope so.
Yeah. I feel like of any of the one season characters, I could see her being like an actual main cast member of the movie.
To be a plot driving character. I think
I hope so.
really want that.
Frankie is a very easy person. You know, say she still works at Greendale. That's a very easy person to have, like, oh no, we need to get the group back together or whatever. You know, like that's an easy control person to have. I think.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about like that conversation she and Annie had, maybe in episode 3, it's like Annie called her first, right? It's like crisis at Greendale,
Mhm.
right? So you can
Mhm.
imagine Frankie easily occupying that role, at least from a narrative perspective. Yeah.
I would love that.
Absolutely. Easy.
Well, I'm
I
really
want 'em
glad
all
you
back.
all joined us for this. These roundtables are so much fun. It's fun
Thanks
to
so much.
you guys genuinely every time make me like I'll have my opinion and be so certain of it, and then one of you will say, well, I did or didn't like it because of this. I'm like, oh yeah, that too. Yeah, you're also right. So I love thinking even these episodes I've seen dozens of times, you can still get a new perspective on them, which is really neat. Before we leave, I want everyone to kind of run down and tell people your podcast if you've got one that's going, your social media if you'd like people to follow you, all that good stuff. Like just popcorn, whoever feels led by the Spirit to speak in church.
The Spirit moves
There you go.
me.
Yeah.
You can find me, Reverend, at TV's Kevin Lanigan on the major social media platforms. And you can listen to me talk on Advanced Media Studies, where we also covered every episode of Community. And we're currently talking about Hitchhiker's Guide. We've talked about The Witcher and Mythic Quest, all kinds of crap over there. So you can go on over there and listen to that. And Crazy Ex Pod Friends is where I am talking about Crazy Ex Girlfriend. And that's what we're doing. But I have like a bunch of film projects in the can, like we have a bunch of footage that has been shot. Those things are coming soon. And the best
Awesome.
place to follow that is TV's Kevin Lanigan on all the stuff.
That's a man who knows how to plug.
I feel so complimented.
Who now?
Zoey,
Who
you
else?
go ahead.
Spell your
Okay.
You go
wares.
ahead, Zoey, then I'll-
I'll be quick.
Hear ye, hear ye.
because as we discussed at the beginning, I'm not really in the podcast swing right now. So actually, thank you guys for inviting me once again, because this
Glad
is
to
the
have
first
you.
time I've done something in months. So this is fun. But yeah, if you want to, I'm tweeting all the time though, so feel free to follow me on my personal Twitter, Z Wilshire Prime, 2 L's in Wilshire. And if you want to follow the Twitter account for the podcast, it's at SGC_podcast for the Save Greendale Committee. But no recent activity there. But if I am going to be coming back anytime in the future, I'll probably be reactivating that account and using it a lot. So
Hey, it's as good of a
you know,
time as ever to be making community content.
that's true. I know. I've got to I need to officially announce the release date, so I know how much time I have to milk it. So we'll see. But yeah, who knows? If I might come back to podcasting or some form of content creation. But until then, yeah, I'm trying to get my jokes off on Twitter. So come for
There we
that.
go.
Yeah, I'm Colin Cox. On Twitter, it's Colin Ashley Cox, I think. I host the Hop-Ons Podcast. We've spoken about Arrested Development, Twin Peaks, and now Community. I believe we're at Hop-Ons Pod. I also host a podcast called the Cluttered Desk Podcast, and there's nothing I could really say to explain what we do there. We talk about a little bit of everything. So if you like X-Men, we talk about X-Men from time to time. I see Kevin perked up. My
Been activated.
podcast partner, Andrew, is an avid X-Men reader. We've primarily talked about the movies. We've talked at times about some of the comic runs. That's a thing that exists in the world. So the Hop-Ons Podcast and the Cluttered Desk Podcast.
Well, great.
Nice.
We want to thank everybody one more time for joining us, and go check out the stuff that these people are making, because they're all really cool. And even though we all do something similar, we all have very different voices, very different opinions. And I think it's worth listening to all of the community podcasts to get all of these different opinions. So go check them out. And I don't know what to say to wrap this thing up. This is always the hardest part. So
I know.
bye,
You don't
everybody.
have to
Thanks
go
for
home.
listening.
You gotta get the hell out of here.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun doing these roundtables. Has been great. And I
Thanks,
want to thank
everyone, so
the
much.
3 of you for joining us. And so long.
Thank you.
I'm Ice Cube Head.
All right, everybody. Thank you. That was our season 6 roundtable. We want to again thank Colin, Kevin, and Zoey for coming on the show, whether for the first time
And a special
or
thanks to CKZ in the morning.
whether it was their first time or one of their multiple times. I'm very glad that they joined us. Season 6 is kind of a hot topic, isn't it?
Yeah,
There was a lot of
I was
agreeing and
really
disagreeing.
surprised with how varied our tops and bottoms were today.
Well, nobody wants the same top or bottom every time.
You gotta
need a
mix it
little
up.
variety, or else you're just prolapse for nothing. So yes, check out all of the projects that those great people do. I'm really grateful to have met all three of them and everyone who's ever been on any of our roundtables. Those like the late great departed Dom and Andre from
R.I.P.
season 1. It's been a big part of our podcast to have these conversations with these people, and I'll miss it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
I'm sure there's never going to, hopefully, there's never another reason for us to do a podcast at the same time as like 25 other people. So it makes it really easy to do stuff like this. But having that has been very, very unique and very fun, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think we consider ourselves very lucky to have been connected with such an awesome community of people that has welcomed us in with open arms and supported us through everything. So
yeah. Well, the self-congratulation does not stop here. We're going to be back next week with the first of, and I want to set expectations for the next 7 weeks. We're going to be doing these community superlative top 5 list episodes. You know that we're list boys. We like to make lists of things and talk about those lists and act as if the composition of said list means anything to anyone other than ourselves. You know that we really like doing that. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks, talking about some community top 5 lists as we're bridging the gap between community and the good place. This show will continue to come out every Monday with these 30-minute superlative episodes starting next week, with the first one on our top 5 homage episodes of community. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Keep on hanging out with us every week because we're not going nowhere.
we're right here.
As we're wrapping things up here, again, patreon.com/can'tdisappointpodcast. The patrons got to watch us live stream as we recorded today's season 6 roundtable. We do all kinds of cool things, all types of exclusive podcasts over at patreon.com/can'tdisappointpodcast. Put a feather in our cap, put a nickel in our ass. Just do
slide it right up in there. We don't even need a whole quarter.
Steven, where else can the people find us?
You know, if you really want to penny our nickels, you can find both of those things over on Twitter over at You Can't Dis Pod. We're also on Instagram under the name Can't Disappoint Podcast.
Good save.
We're also We're also on Facebook and YouTube under the whole name of the show, You Can't Disappoint a Podcast. Come check us out there when we do things and we have videos from them. That's where they'll be. So go check it out. Check it out.
Thank you again for joining us one more time. Thank you, Kevin, Zoey, and Colin. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for listening. From inside the Dreamatorium, Black Lives Matter, I'm Zach.
I'm Steven.
And we love you. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Kisses on your cheeks.
Give me some more time in a dream.